Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of the Bros and Cons podcast. This is episode 3. I'm Katie, and
I'm Vic.
today we're going to be talking about the newly released series called The Last of Us, something that we're really excited about. So right off the top, this is going to be really spoiler heavy. So if you haven't seen it, go watch it before you watch and or listen to this.
Yes.
Okay. So we're really excited today. And the first thing I kind of want to jump into is really the team and the showrunner, especially, and the writer, Craig Mazin, who did probably my favorite TV series to date, Chernobyl. If you guys haven't watched Chernobyl, it can act as sort of an interesting primer for what so far we're seeing in The Last of Us.
Yeah, completely agree.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I was really, really excited from the jump, knowing where this team came from going into The Last of Us. And The Last of Us is important to me as a piece of storytelling, even as a video game. And I know that it's really, really important to you. You have the tattoo, you've got the merch, you got it all. So can you talk to us a little bit? It just faded right into the background.
Yeah, it didn't work out like I thought it would.
That giant hole that you have tattooed on the arm.
Just blended in there.
Can you talk to me and talk to us a little bit about why it's so important to you?
Yeah. It's where to begin. So it came out when I was I played it on my 20th birthday. So I was still very young when it came out. So we're going on 10 years now. And it was right after I'd graduated from film school too, just shortly after. So it was kind of like an impressionable time in my life where I was still, I think, picking out what media mattered to me as a filmmaker and a creative myself. And I'd already been like really into the post-apocalyptic genre. Like to get into film school, I made a post-apocalyptic little short film, and that got me into film school. And just something about these alternate realities of how would people do in these kinds of situations has really resonated with me as, I think, a storyteller. And so when I saw the trailer for this, it really, really caught my attention at the time. And so I played it. I was also not much of a gamer at the time in terms of consoles. I played PC games a lot, and I had like a Game Boy as a kid, and I played like Star Wars Battlefront a lot because I'd say next to Last of Us, Star Wars is like my favorite series. So I was into that, but like when it comes to like an actual console system, I wasn't really comfortable with it. I really struggled to play with moving the player around and things like that. But the game just enticed me so much. I'm like, I have to try this. I have to play it. And it immersed me into this entirely new world of gaming, I think, because before I'd only played like, Star Wars Battlefront, which is, you just control a character and you go around and you shoot things and that's about it. There's no story to it or anything like that. To see like an actual, what essentially it felt like a 15-hour movie. It's just something so novel to me to play something like that. And I initially sucked at it, and it was a pain to get through that game the first time, but I was just so into the story that I really persevered through it and played through it and finished it. And about a week later, I wanted to play it again. And so I played it again, and then I played it yet another time shortly thereafter that. And then the DLC came out, I think 7 months after maybe the game came out, and I was just completely, I think, in love with this universe and these characters at this point, and seeing how a medium where you can become so much more empathetic to a character by playing them versus just watching them on a screen. That was the concept of that was so new to me at the time, and I really fell in love with it, and how you can become engrossed in these characters and the things that they do and the decisions they make. It just opened up this whole new world of storytelling to me, because I've always loved reading, as my first love as a kid, and then also like segueing into movies, and then later on TV shows, and then after that video games. So it's a medium that I play much more casually, and I have to be fully engrossed in the story to really get through the game. But this game is a game that I've played countless times at this point, and just really fallen in love with. I think it just really was tailor-made for my interests and things like that. And then also seeing, I think at the time, a queer character was something a little more new to me at the time, and I think related to that, and it helped me come to terms with who I am as a person. So that was also a really important piece for me to see in media.
When that game first came out, I was heavy into gaming. I went on like a bender where it was like once the PS3 came out, I was playing games all the time. It was like Mass Effect, God of War, Last of Us, Uncharted. All of these games were like it was nonstop for me. And so when this came out, because Uncharted was like, God bless Naughty Dog, but Uncharted was, until The Last of Us came out, my favorite video game series. This game is important to a lot of people, and I think that this show will be just as important to people that never played the games, and I think it'll be an important piece of supplemental storytelling to people that have played the games and love the games, and I'm really excited to see where it goes from here.
Oh, me too. I can't wait.
So we both came into the show as fans of the source material of the game, and I want to talk a little bit about, I think the first thing that I want to talk about is the differences between, right off the bat, the differences between the game and the show so far. And the first big thing was the cold open, which I'm a big old fan of cold opens. If they're like, ooh, man, if they're well done, it's some of the most like, it's like a very powerful tool in,
I agree,
in filmmaking. So let's talk about that. I think that was a really well handled way of introducing people who are not familiar with what you're going to get. And giving fans who are familiar shaky ground. This isn't what we're used to. Like,
no, not
at all.
No. It really broke a barrier setting it in 1968, I think it was, versus, jumping right into the present day. That was, for those of us that have played the game, that was a kind of a curveball.
And it put the event on a clock. We knew, like, even people that aren't familiar, especially people that aren't familiar with the source material, know that something is going to happen. And so the next sequence, Sarah's Day, is filled with this kind of unease. It established a sort of tension, like, okay, something is going to happen. When is it going to happen?
Definitely.
And this is another part, I think, where Craig Mason's brain comes in, because it's like a theme. One of the big themes in Chernobyl was people knew about this and nothing happened. Nobody did anything about it. And I feel like this is kind of the same thing is happening here, where it's like people knew that this was the thing that could happen, but we kind of just ignored it. And I want to explore that. I want to, how long did we know that this is actually a huge possibility? That just put so many more things in my head than I ever got from the video game.
Yeah, same. It seems like they're going into how it started a little bit more, versus where in the game it was just kind of like this thing that happened and everyone just kind of dealt with it,
Which I am also a big fan of, like, just dropping the audience into a world.
Me too.
But this was this really worked for me.
Yeah, same. Like, I think, especially since it's already a fungus that exists in the real world and, actually does affect insects. And just the way they kind of were like, this already exists. What if the world got a little warmer? Like, ooh, okay.
I don't remember when, but I'm almost certain it had to be before The Last of Us. I remember watching, I think it was like Planet Earth, or somewhere in that, where they showed fucking cordyceps taking over an ant, and I remember as like a kid just being like, don't love that. And then The Last of Us comes out, and it's like, oh, what if it does happen to people?
No, it's such a terrifying concept. I think on a more, it's still very out there, but on a more realistic term, it kind of like, it's like just grounded enough in reality that you're like, oh shoot, this is kind of scary.
This could happen. We're now everything's on a clock, and we go into, and like, let me preface this by saying I have played and I have watched the prologue of the Last of Us video game so many times.
Same. Too many to
This
count.
this prologue in this show still fucked me up. It was
Same.
there was so much good juicy
Oh
tension
yeah.
in it.
Yeah, that's the thing is it's like I've played the game countless times and I've watched it on YouTube and watched other
Mhm.
people's reactions on YouTube countless times too. Like I don't want to say I'm desensitized to playing that opening, but like I've seen it so many times, I've explored it so many times, and it's like I was playing it for the first time all over again when I
Mhm.
watched it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's pause here and talk for a second about the casting.
Yes. So, which fun tidbit.
In just of Sarah's Day, let's talk about just the casting of Sarah's Day first.
Yeah. So they cast Nico Parker as Sarah, which fun tidbit here. So Marcy, my wife, is sitting there throughout the whole Sarah sequence. She's like, this girl looks just like Tandy Newton.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, she kind of does. I'm like, wait a second. And I like my mind went back to seeing like something on like Instagram or something like a
Yeah.
month or two ago. And I'm like, I think it is her daughter. And I looked at, sure enough,
Yeah.
of course, Tandy Newton, who's an amazing actress, has an amazing actress for a daughter.
Yeah.
And they really did pick, I think, the perfect person to play this role because in the game, you play her until she
Yeah.
dies. And that
Spoiler.
really connects the character or you to the character in that
Mhm.
way because there's something about playing a character that really connects you to them, from on an empathetic level. Like when I first played the game, I didn't know she was gonna die. I
Mhm.
thought she was the girl on the
Well, no one
cover.
did. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't pay close enough attention to the cover, and I'm just
Mhm.
like, even though I'd watched the trailer and stuff, it just didn't click.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, this girl's dying.
Mhm.
And you need to kind of have that, I think, that connection, and they did it so well, seeing
Mhm.
the world kind of unravel around her as she goes about her day.
Mhm.
um
I like that they kept in and added to and this is a really good example of just right off the bat supplementing the material and
yeah,
making it a similar experience to a similarly visceral experience to what
yeah,
you played but
absolutely.
just by watching it. And there's something about like she's got a real wisdom about her, like a real grounded warmth about her to me that made me kind of fall in love with her and
Hmm.
made me just really dread everything that was happening. It was just great. I'm so glad that they kept the focus on her for this prologue.
I am too. Like I was really wondering, how they were going to do that, if
Hmm.
they would maybe stretch out flashbacks throughout the series, but
Hmm.
that just didn't feel right to me.
Yeah.
So I was really wondering, like, are they going to make it the entire episode?
Hmm.
But that almost seemed like it would be too long. But they did
Hmm.
make it, I think, a good chunk. It was like 30-ish, 40 minutes focused on her,
Yeah.
that is a good length of time, I think, to become connected to a character. And they
To
did it
become
so
connected to
well.
her and understand on more than just a surface level, understand Joel's reaction to
Yes,
it.
exactly.
Speaking of Joel,
Yeah, speaking of
Joel
Joel,
has been
the one and the only Pedro Pascal
who
is
we have met in
Joel.
this house,
Yeah, every house.
every
And
house.
who basically auditioned for this role by playing the Mandalorian, I feel like. So,
I don't,
um,
well, I don't know about that because my biggest touchstone, like the reason why I feel like he was cast
yeah.
was because of his role in what was it freaking called? The space one.
Which one?
It was a short film first.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. No, I've seen the short film many times. Spectre?
No,
No, no, that's
space
James Bond.
prospect.
Prospect.
Spectre.
I got a little anagram with that.
Yeah,
The letters were there, they were just out of order.
were they?
Kinda.
Kind of. But yeah, that to me was like the biggest touchstone. I think why I was because like even if I didn't love Pedro Pascal, if I had seen Prospect, I'm like, oh, he can fucking play this. He
Yeah.
was great in that movie.
I still
That's
need
the
to see
one
the
that because
movie.
as much as I loved him in like the first thing I feel like I saw him in besides Law and Order probably was like Game of Thrones,
Yeah,
where most
same.
people
That's
most
where
people's
most
first
people are
exposure.
familiar with
And
him.
like I liked him, but I'm not like
Sure.
the biggest Game of Thrones fan
Hmm.
out there. But then I saw Prospect, and he
Yeah.
blew me away in that movie.
Oh yeah, I can
So
imagine. Like based off of
so
the short, what I know about like the short film, I
mhm.
still haven't seen the actual feature length, but I
it
imagine
would
he
it would
played it
be
perfectly.
it would be it's very much up your alley. It's like
Oh no,
Annihilation. It's like the slow contemplation of Annihilation with
yeah,
like
hmm,
it's anyway.
yeah,
So I think that that's kind of what
hmm.
may have
I
helped him
can
get the
see that
role.
too. Yeah,
Yeah. So that was perfect casting, and also the casting of Gabriel Luna as Tommy was just, let me tell you, I love Gabriel Luna. He's Robbie Reyes is gonna be the best ghostwriter
oh,
ever.
hands down.
And he brings so much like intelligence and warmth even to like that terrible
Hmm.
Terminator movie that he was in.
Oh yeah,
Like he's usually, from what I've seen of his work, he's better than the source material. Like
yeah,
there's
it
better
really
than the
feels
material
like
that he's
that.
in.
Hmm.
So I'm really, really, really stoked to see him get something like this.
Same. And he's such a huge fan of the games from what I've heard.
Hmm.
Like you can just tell he's got Tommy down. Like
Hmm.
the voice he nails.
Yeah.
But, more important than the voice and mannerisms and all that, like you do still have to really embody the character. And
Hmm.
he truly seems to be doing that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I liked their expansion on their relationship. Because I mean, this is all again stuff that you can't do in a video game. That like this was the medium that a story like this was made for, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah.
And I always wondered when I was playing the game, like, where's Joel
Hmm.
when Sarah goes night night? Like when she wakes up, where did
Yeah.
he go? And
Right.
why is he with Tommy? Why would he leave her? And like
Exactly.
that was a really good addition, I think,
Yeah,
to
there's so many things that the show did that really kind of fill in every little gap that you would think didn't need to be filled,
hmm
because in the game you just kind of like fill it in yourself. Like it's kind of like one of those things where it's like less is more.
hmm
And the game is so tight for that. But they're doing such a good job of expanding the world in these little minimal ways that just really helps, I think, sell these characters and just add more um, texture
hmm
to everything.
Yeah, definitely. So going back to this prologue and Sarah's day, there were it was really good following her for a whole day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And it was, they added some really smart small things that I thought were really tense.
yeah, I
Um
agree. Yeah,
in particular, the subtlety of the kid's hand twitching in her class.
that's one moment I really loved, and just
Hmm.
how they kind of did that reveal with the reflection landing on Sarah's hand, and that gets
Hmm.
her attention, and she looks up and she just sees this jerking
It's
hand
it's
motion.
just a smart thought.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a smart piece of
It's
direction. It's a smart
great
piece of writing.
storytelling visually.
Yeah.
It's like that's what film's all about,
Hmm.
and they did that so well.
Yeah. Without going overboard at all.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, the one way to really get to my heart is to have a dog in anything,
Yeah.
and to
I
have
think
a smart
anyone's
dog
heart.
that knows that there's something going on.
Hmm.
That's one of my favorite tools in the horror tool belt is having a dog know, or mostly a dog, but an animal know what's going on.
Right.
Um, the shot where, and I'm like a gigantic baby when it comes to horror films. Like I like scary stuff,
Yeah.
but like, man, am I a little bitch. But there's a shot in this show that was horrific. It's really interesting that they chose an old lady who cannot move, cannot talk, cannot even eat a biscuit,
To
to, in
go.
the background, you see her. Silent shit scares me. And to see her in the background just silently screaming
Yeah.
and twitching and
Oh.
moving in very uncomfortable ways,
Yeah.
Wow.
It was good. And you kind of,
Ew.
it unnerves you because then Sarah leaves the room and you're like, oh no, is she gonna
Yeah,
get out of
well,
her
no, not
chair?
Sarah
Like,
doesn't even leave there. Sarah like walks by her.
I know, and she just doesn't, who's gonna pay attention to the old
Who's gonna
woman in the
exactly.
wheelchair? And it's
Exactly.
so unnerving. And
Hmm.
you already know what's gonna happen
Hmm.
in some form.
And this was another good expansion on this was another good added bit is like we don't really see how the infection takes hold, how
Mhm.
it changes the body. And I think we're probably going to get more of that.
I
But
agree.
this was our first time seeing it in action other than like in the background someone, gets up.
Right. Like you kind of just in the game anyway, you didn't really see the infection run its course from beginning to end necessarily. It
Hmm.
was just kind of like someone's bit and
Gotta
10
shoot
hours
him.
later, yep, got to shoot them or 10 hours later you see them like fully like already turned. So
Yeah.
to see this like more of a progression, it's going to be interesting. So one scene, like there are many scenes in here that really stood out as being kind of like shot for shot, almost word for word. Many of them were shot for shot, word for word, same framing, like even like the focal length and everything is the same, which as a filmmaker, like that's just something you really pay attention to, and it truly is like a great appreciation to detail. But seeing the scene on where they're sitting on the couch and
Hmm.
she gives them the watch and
Drugs.
everything,
I
drugs.
sell hardcore drugs.
Yes. Like little things like that. It's like you can't take a line like that out because it's just so silly and iconic to the game.
Hmm.
But then also, they extend that scene on a little bit.
Hmm.
And the movie she gives to him happens to be the same movie that he's obsessed with and wants to watch it in the second game. So it's like little details like that that are really interesting to see.
Hmm.
Just building the world out like that is just really
Hmm.
cool.
Like I said, I always wondered why Joel was gone when she woke
Hmm.
up and why he was suddenly with Tommy when when they finally got
Yeah.
back. That was it when it wasn't like make it obviously it wasn't like make or break for me, but I
Sure.
loved what they did with it.
Yeah,
And
me too.
establishing too that Tommy punched out an infected, essentially. Like that was because
Oh,
he
that was
says
Joel.
no, no, no. On the phone, Tommy says
Oh,
a guy freaked out on a waitress and
that's
started
right.
swinging at her, so I knocked him out. So Tommy fucked up like a phase one infected
Right.
on the over the phone, and so I'm and Joel, the older brother, has to go and
Hmm.
bail him out. I just thought that was
Yeah.
really like really simple, really sweet, really good
Hmm.
addition.
Definitely. Yeah. And then they still kind of segue back to, he still carries her up the stairs to bed. And then
Hmm.
that's where they again
That's it.
depart.
That's his baby.
Yeah. And then again, they kind of depart from what happened in the game where she isn't in the house when all this goes down. She actually leaves the house because of the dog. And
Hmm.
just seeing that dog scared
Which same,
for its life,
yeah.
it really sets the tone that something is horribly, horribly wrong here.
And that's what I'm saying is like that's one of my favorite tools is like, yeah, use that dog. Use it.
Yeah.
Use it. I love
And
it.
so,
So now I want to talk about the second biggest change from the video game, which is the tendrils.
arguably the biggest change, I think.
Oh, well, the first, I guess I should say the second one that we saw, with the first being the cold
Yes.
open, the
No.
second one, yeah.
So I think I first heard about that maybe like a week or two ago.
What are you doing?
What? What?
Where did you hear it? What were you researching? You're trying to,
The tendrils?
yeah.
Yeah, like a week or two ago, they made some press announcement that it was going to be,
That they were going to be tendrils.
yeah, instead of spores. And I'm like, what is a tendril? What does that mean?
Wait.
Yeah,
You just blew my mind for a second. Okay, so
yeah,
instead of spores,
yeah,
they're taking out spores.
yeah. There's no spores at
That's
all.
what I was waiting for this episode. That's
Nope,
interesting.
nope. So there are no spores at all. They've completely changed how the virus works. So instead of bites
Oh,
and spores, it's now bites and tendrils.
interesting.
And I don't think we've even seen the full effect of what tendrils do.
Yeah.
So from what it seems like, and I could be wrong, I mean, we don't know yet, but it seems like they, like, in dark spaces may, like, grab people and things like that instead of spores being in the air.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is very, very different. And when I heard that, I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that.
See, this is why I said the second biggest thing that we saw, because I try to stay away from big stuff like that
Yeah.
until I see something. That's why I said, what are you doing? Like, that seems like deeper research than I
Yeah, sorry, I thought that was like common knowledge at this point.
Nope, I just assumed that it was something that like took place in phase 1.
No. So
Okay.
basically, I think the reasoning behind it was visually that's harder to do. I think it was either Craig or Neil or somebody said people are smarter than they were pre-COVID. And the concept of an airborne virus just seems almost like a plot hole. So, they've completely nixed the concept of spores, which works for a game because visually it looks really cool and your character can avoid it by putting on a mask or a gas mask. But in the show, that obviously I don't think they want to cover up someone's face for half the screen time. So it makes sense. But huge departure from the game there.
Yeah.
And I have to say, like, hearing about the tendrils, I was just 100% unprepared for what those were going to look like.
Yeah.
I was not ready for how absolutely disgusting that was going to be.
Disgusting.
I am grossed out. I'm disgusted.
I don't like, so the biggest, let me compare the only thing that I really have to compare it to, because fucking yuck.
Yeah.
Was there's like a scene in 28 Days Later where one of the zombies just vomits blood into someone else's mouth. Yeah. And that's the only thing that I can compare it to. I don't think I've seen something like this. It grossed me out, dude.
Yeah, I was not ready at all for what that was going to be. I thought maybe tendrils meant it would just be like vines that, because I'm like, okay, that's kind of on brand for like the design of The Last of Us. I didn't think they were going to be in someone's mouth.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah.
So huge difference compared to the game, and just not ready for that at all. And I'm very engrossed and grossed out as to how this is going to go the rest of the show.
That makes me really, so I'm going to save actually that thought until we get a little bit further along in this, but it's, that scene again is really different, because like you said, Sarah leaves her house because of the dog, which same, and although I probably would have just brought the dog inside and been like, this is mine now. But it was that was so effective because they set us up and we know these people. Right. We don't just know them as neighbor, whatever.
Yeah, I think it was like Jimmy or something like that in the game. Yeah. And you just hear about him from a distance. You never actually see him.
Yeah, as a person.
Right.
Yeah. And so to have Sarah walk into that situation was just
jarring.
It really set you up.
And then to see, then of course Tommy and Joel roll up like, what are you doing? Get behind me. And I love how
that was a lot different tonally than what they actually sounded like. Oh, what are you doing? Get behind me.
Yeah. And much stronger, urgent wording than that.
Come on, kid.
Let's go. Yeah, much different. And also I like how there was kind of hesitancy in the game where he was like, oh, Jimmy, I'm warning you, don't do this. And my monotone recollection of these series of events.
Yeah, he kept warning him.
Yeah.
Before he shot him, I think.
Right. Thinking that he was still there in some sense, not understanding what this was, versus at that point in the show, they already know what this is, but they're still like, how do we handle a situation like this? And I like how Tommy's just like, what are we doing, Joel? Like, how are we going to handle this? And Joel, being extra protective, just gives no fucks and hits her over the head with a tool,
A wrench.
a wrench. That's what it was. I couldn't remember what it was.
Yeah, but also the only reason, like, now that we kind of know, or that now that we know that they kind of know what they're dealing with,
Mm-hmm.
is because they set up that Joel went and picked up Tommy
Yep.
from the jail, and Tommy on the phone again was like, it's a madhouse in here.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Right.
people are going nuts in here, and so Joel, it's that really good implication that, like,
They've already been
they
through
fought
something.
off a bunch of
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
Because I think when he in the game, I think when he gets home, I think Sarah's like, "Is that blood on you?" or something
Hmm.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
clearly they've already gone through something, and he's been
Hmm.
out with Tommy. So
Yeah.
really
But
interesting to see them expand on that in a different light.
the getting into town, they're like a little fun Easter, like smaller fun Easter eggs, like
Hmm.
them driving past the barn that was on fire. That was
Right.
really good. But
Even the
man, them getting into the town really,
yeah, I think out of
really ramped things up.
the entire episode, that was the most tense part.
Hmm.
And it was so similar to the gameplay, but so ramped up
Hmm.
past 10.
There's something, because
Um,
video games, it's like you expect violence. You
yep.
expect to see what you're seeing in that game, but to
Hmm.
see it portrayed this way, it was like the panic was so much more visceral to me.
I
Um,
agree. Yeah. Yeah, like in games, I feel like they kind of feed off of that kind of energy, but to see
mhm.
that portrayed cinematically is an entirely different ballgame. Before
Throwback to when you didn't realize that a plane crashed in the trailer.
okay. So I guess we all should have known that was coming. I don't know why I forgot in that moment. I think I was just so engaged in the episode and I was waiting for the bus.
Right.
I kept waiting and they did a fake out if you caught that. But there's a scene where the camera pivots just like it does in the game and you see the headlights of a truck coming.
Yeah.
And then it never hits them. It stops in time. And I think everyone that has played the game probably braced in that moment because they thought, oh,
Yeah.
this is it. And then nothing happened. And then you're like, okay,
Yeah.
well, when are they going to get, T-boned from the side here?
Yeah.
And then you just see this plane. And it's so much more just, it's such a high budget thing that they did that was so unexpected.
This was also the first time, because, like, also planes going down in disaster movies, in horror
Mm-hmm.
films and stuff, is such a trope to me.
It's so
But for
tropey.
some reason,
It works.
it made so much sense. Of course they would shoot these planes down. They set that up for us in the very first
Yeah.
scene, because he
Yeah.
talked about how planes are that's how things get transmitted.
Yeah.
And so of course
Yeah.
it makes sense
Of
for them to
course.
shoot a bunch of planes down. Like,
Yeah.
that was the first time that something like that has ever worked for
Yeah.
me.
We're also just losing control. The pilots are getting ill, things
But
like that.
the engines were on fire. So the
That's right.
implication there, and because there were like 3 in
Yeah.
a row,
They're
the
literally shooting
implication
them.
there is that those jets that Sarah saw earlier were shooting planes down. Of course they would be.
Right. It's
amazing
crazy.
to me.
Yeah, it's such a great detail because, like, of course that would happen.
The other thing that was good was having the Desert Storm veteran sticker, bumper sticker
Yeah,
on
that's
Tommy's
another
truck.
good little detail that I think
Hmm.
explains why he's got all this experience and
Hmm.
how they were able to get out of a situation like that.
So in the ooh, there's something about things twitching. Like,
Yeah.
there's, and I
So
had told you when the trailer came out, this guy freaked me out. Was the
yeah, when
guy
he
that,
like
like,
pops up.
goes, yeah.
Going into that scene, there's something about the way they lingered on the close-ups of the people that were already just essentially, the only way to say this is they were being feasted on. And just the shots of kind of like lingering on the close-up of someone as they're laying there completely helpless, about to die. And they make eye contact with Joel. That was just like really unsettling to me.
I think, yeah, I think that's because Craig Mazin directed this episode.
Yes, he did.
And that's a very Craig Mazin thing of, like,
Mhm.
you can't look away from this.
No.
This is, so I really appreciated that too.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. And then that all leads into the guy chases him. Let me say, I was
And the
also
chase was
not
good. This was
prepared for how I think we're going to see another difference here where it's like there's this loss of motor control, and
Mm-hmm.
get to the target as fast as you can, no matter what.
Yeah.
And to see the way the guy was just kind of leaping through that diner
Yeah.
was really
Oof.
disturbing. But
Don't like it.
no, and how he kind of like slid, he went flying into like a table or a shelf or
Yeah.
something.
And I say I don't like it in the best way possible.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
really like,
Oh, it was so
blah.
unsettling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's completely different from the game. I think in the game they still retain the sense of motor control, and this guy
Yes.
seemed to have none
Yeah.
as he was chasing them down. So it is very unsettling.
Yeah.
And
That was something that James pointed out to me. I don't
mhm.
remember, not that I didn't notice it, but he was like, he's klutzy. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yep. And that leads us right into, I think, one of the most famous scenes in the whole game,
Mm-hmm.
and the setup for this entire plot of the
Mm-hmm.
series, where Sarah gets killed by the soldier in the
Mm-hmm.
right outside the diner. And it was again another thing, I think, that I felt like it was almost shot for shot, word for word, um,
Yes.
almost identical. One line I noticed that he didn't say in the show that the guard said in the game was, "Sir,
She's just a little kid.
yes, yeah," and they took that line out completely. This
Yeah.
guard was more by the book, like, okay, I have to do this regardless.
Yeah.
There was no sympathy or no hesitancy whatsoever, which I did like that a little bit more in the game. I think I was a little
Mm-hmm. I
disappointed
did too.
that they
That's
didn't put that
I
line
was
in there.
looking out for that
Yeah,
line too. Yeah.
yeah, that scene, to see it again, it was still just as heartbreaking. It was again like watching it for the first time all over
Mm-hmm.
again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's something that I wasn't sure that would happen like that. But it really
Yeah.
was like playing the game for the first time all over again. It
Yeah.
was surreal.
Just the acting
Hmm.
was so.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. I think my one small gripe with this entire episode, and this is a very, very small gripe because I think this is a 10 out of 10 episode, is I like the original score as she's dying more than I
Mm.
like their variation that they put in the show. I think something about Gustavo's score stood out to me a lot more.
Story.
Story.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that, but I also, his score makes you feel.
It
And
does, and that's what I love about it.
I think in that moment you didn't need that. Because
No,
in a cinematic format,
yeah,
I
you don't
think, and
necessarily need
this
it.
is also another big Craig Mazin thing, is like, you don't want to be made to feel with anything more than what is happening on your, to
Exactly.
your eyes.
Right.
So
There's nothing.
I
Yeah.
definitely understand where you're coming from, but I think it also comes from uh a place of like a fandom, you know what I mean? Like, this
Agreed.
is my
Yeah.
favorite thing in the world. I think it's stuff
Oh,
like
for
that is sort
sure.
of like less needed in this format, for
I think
sure.
so too, because I think there's also a real strong, you know, absence of music can be just as powerful. And this was still music, but it was very minimalist.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think it was very much intentional for them to
Yeah.
go that route. That's just my very
But
small
I
gripe.
do agree with you that there
Yeah.
was something really powerful in I understand why they did it, because I just gave that explanation, but there's something really powerful in the game about the score ramping into the titles. But
Yes.
also, I don't think that that was needed in this format.
Agreed. Yeah. No, the layout is entirely different here
Mm-hmm.
with how they, because in the game you go from the game, this intro into the opening titles, whereas in the show it's just that little prologue of the talk
Mm-hmm.
show, and then it goes into the titles.
Mm-hmm.
So completely different execution of how the game versus the show starts, but I
Yeah.
think it's equally as strong still,
Yeah.
very much so.
I think it was really effective. Or,
Yeah.
yeah, really effective. So that leads us into a little boy
Yes.
uh going to the Fedra
QZ,
QZ.
which was also very, very, this nothing like this was in the game whatsoever.
Hmm.
So this was a complete departure.
Hmm.
But I think it was important to show like there's no mercy, there's no cure, there's no, um,
But I think it was really interesting to set up Fedra as not all
yeah,
monsters, because
Yeah.
that woman showed so much sadness and so much
Yeah.
empathy
And
towards this
compassion.
kid, so much
Yeah.
compassion towards this kid, which I thought made this is again something that they can make more well-rounded in this format.
For sure. Yeah.
Because like you just like hate Fedra, but not
Right.
here, not in this moment. There
Mm-hmm.
are compassionate folks inside the establishment.
Exactly, because in the game, it's very much portrayed as this evil entity,
Hmm.
and controlling government entity. Whereas here,
Hmm.
it's like, because of course, not every individual in any one thing is all going to be this monster evil. Like the world is so much more gray than that, and especially in the Last of Us world, it's all about being morally gray.
Hmm.
And
There's just stuff that you can't necessarily show in a video game because you do have a limited amount of
you
time.
do, yeah. So it was so powerful to see more layers and more sides to everything, really. You know, even when
Hmm.
Joel is trading supplies with the guard, you see that
Hmm.
this guard
They're human.
really, yeah, they're human. You know, he hates his job, so
Hmm.
he pops pills to get through his life. You know, so
Yeah.
it's just really sad to see.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good scene though. And also I'm interested to see if tendrils are like the way of this virus going around. How did how dangerous is it then that this kid just had a scratch on his knee and that's how he got it?
Right.
That is,
Yeah.
so I'm interested for them to explore that a little bit more.
Right, because it didn't look like a bite. It just kind of looked like he
Mm-mm,
fell
just
and
like a
skinned his knee.
scratch.
So
Hmm.
I'm very interested to see what that is like.
Yeah, yeah, me too. The next really interesting character beat was going from the last time we saw Joel 20 years ago was
Hmm.
him holding his dead daughter in his
Arms.
arms,
Yeah.
going to him being able to be the one that just kind of carelessly throws a kid's body into the fire.
Yeah. Like it.
And
Yeah.
that was it's just good storytelling.
It is.
It's just
It's.
really good.
I mean, it's been 20 years at this point. He's been through countless things that you can't even imagine. Um, you know, based off what you know in the game, he's had a really messed up past in the 20 years and done some really unspeakable things,
Hmm.
that they allude to, but you can never know for sure.
Hmm.
So, just really interesting to see how he's just emotionally shut down at this point and been
Hmm.
through everything.
Yeah, this is also because like Joel in the games, he's dangerous.
Mhm.
Joel in the games,
Yes.
but this is a feral side to him that I didn't get in the games.
Hmm.
There's something feral to him, something
Yeah.
like
Survival.
something, I don't even know if it's survival. It's just
Yeah.
going for the sake of it
Yeah.
kind of thing.
It's a very interesting take.
It's really interesting. So let's talk about one of your faves, Anna Torv,
Oh yeah.
as
So
Tess.
I was so happy with that casting. Because
Hmm.
again, another thing in my late teens, early 20s that I was just obsessed with at the time was Fringe.
Hmm.
So to see Anna Torv cast as Tess, I'm like, that's a dream casting for me
Hmm.
personally right there. I'm like, she's
Yeah.
perfect for this. You
Yeah.
know, so I was super excited to see that because I just see her filling that role so well.
She's so
She's a very,
good.
very underrated actress, in my opinion.
Hmm.
I haven't seen her in too much else. I think the last thing I saw her in was Mindhunter, and she's great
Mindhunter.
in
That
that.
was, yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know if I just don't run into her acting as much. I
Hmm.
know she's on some shows and stuff, but I haven't really watched much else she's
Well,
done. I
let's
just know
see.
she's just an incredible actress, and I think very
Hmm.
underrated. And I think this is a perfect role for her to go into.
I agree. I agree. She's great in it, and I like that character. We didn't get a lot of her in the game,
Yeah.
so I love what they're doing here
I do too.
with
I
her.
love that they're really showing a more intimate relationship between her and Joel.
Hmm.
It was
Something
always
that was implied.
it was
Um,
implied, but never really shown extensively. There were a few bits of dialogue and some body language and things in the game that, you know, very clearly alluded to that. But to see them acting so intimately in person, it's just really cool to see.
hmm.
Because you knew that was happening. They just were being all business in front of Ellie and whatnot. So
Hmm.
it's just nice to see just a little bit more backstory to their relationship, and I think it's gonna just make the next episode or two even more powerful. So I'm
Yeah,
excited for that.
I agree. So let's talk about Ellie.
Oh boy. Oh yes. So I was also another casting I was just really thrilled over because she was great in her little bit of Game of Thrones, I thought. Just
Oh,
really
she's
sold that
fantastic.
character. She was amazing. I know there's, for whatever reason, the poor girl gets a lot of hate. But I think she's a really, really great actress.
Maybe I'm not as internet savvy as you, but everybody loved her when she came out in Game of
Yeah.
Thrones.
Yeah, no, after that she started, for whatever reason, people were like, "Oh, I find her annoying and this and that." And who, maybe it's just the male dominated sphere of people that dislike her, I don't know, but it seems like there's kind of a divide about her casting as Ellie.
Oh, well, there it is.
Yeah. Um
Yeah. Video
yeah.
game critics are some of the harshest.
Oh, so harsh, yeah. So I was sold on her from the get-go. And I'm like,
Mhm.
this girl's such a great choice. Even, I was very excited to see that. So as soon as they introduced her and she kicks that tray away, I was like, yep, that's Ellie right there. Like, I
Yeah.
was instantly, I didn't really have any doubts before, but I was just instantly bought that that's Ellie. She was perfect casting for the
Yeah, I
role.
agree.
She even kind of adds more
Mhm.
to the character, I feel like, in different ways and different layers. Like her delivery of some of the lines in the show is different than the game, and actually makes the lines stand out more in the show than they did in the game. Like in the game,
Yeah.
she just kind of breathes a sigh of relief, like, "Oh, I'm outside. This is awesome." But in the show, it turns into this almost like jarring but really funny moment where she just kind of pops up and she's like, "Oh, I'm outside," and they're like, "What are
Yeah.
you doing? Get down!" And I really
Yeah.
love that. It just, these little comedic but also scary moments are just really, I think they're going to be really, really well done.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that they expanded a little bit more on Marlene. So it's good.
Marlene,
I thought it was really good that
I
they established
love,
that relationship
yeah,
right away.
yeah.
And Bella Ramsey's reaction to when she brought up Riley. Ooh,
So
ooh, it was
good.
good. Ooh,
Yeah,
it was
and
good.
it does seem implied that she hasn't met Marlene before this
Hmm.
moment in the show, whereas in the
Yeah.
games she already knew her
Yeah.
and knew that Marlene has some kind of relationship with her mother, who's now deceased. So
Hmm.
it's cool to see. Okay, you know,
Why did you do that? Who are you? I love that. I love that
yeah,
they did that.
I do too. Yeah, and Marlene very clearly knows everything about Ellie, but Ellie knows nothing about her.
Nothing about Marlene.
So that
Yeah.
might lead to some more discovery along the way that I'm excited to see.
Super duper interesting stuff that
Yep.
I'm really excited to see.
Yep.
Yeah. Because we also just to be introduced to Ellie being chained up,
Mm-hmm.
I thought was an interesting like way to establish her. And the
Yep.
my biggest thing that I saw that Bella Ramsey is adding to this character is giving her more fear, more
Mm-hmm.
like she's scared. She's a kid, but
Right.
she's not gonna she's not gonna outright show you that.
No,
But her
but you can
conversation with
tell.
Joel, well, her conversation with Joel, like saying, "You guys have done this before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're gonna be okay, right?"
Right.
But in a
Yeah.
very Ellie way, she can't outright say it.
Right.
And that scene was actually one of my favorites in the show because you see this moment where Joel like leans forward, like he wants to comfort her,
Mm-hmm.
but he can't.
Yeah.
So it's just really good.
It's so well done.
Production design wise.
Yeah, especially that entire sequence from kind of when they stumble across Marlene to
Hmm.
the ending of the episode feels taken straight out of the game.
Hmm.
Granted, the way they come across Marlene and Robert is almost entirely different from the game. I think
Hmm.
that's another really big departure storytelling wise, but
But I liked it.
understandably for the sake of time.
Hmm.
Um, you don't see quite as much of Tess's give no fucks attitude. I
I
mean,
think
you
I
do,
think you did.
but she's not double tapping anybody in the head.
Oh, sure,
Yeah,
sure. But
she's
there,
a little more violent in the game understandably, because it's a game.
This one, she was a lot more calculating.
Yeah, and so to kind of like see them stumble across Robert already dead, instead of them handling him and taking care of him, they just kind of come across this bloodbath situation, and that's where Ellie has her first introduction to Joel, and that was brutal. And that was the comical way too. Again, because she just comes flying out of the room and he bitch slaps her into the wall.
It's very Ellie, it's very Joel.
It is, yeah. It's just a way, I think, a perfect way for them to start off there. Because again, that's kind of exactly how they meet in the game too. This was almost a little bit more violent in a way, but comical too. I think they really upped that energy of how they met in the game and handled it perfectly. So it was really cool to see. And then just kind of how Marlene is like, you gotta take her, there's no other way to do this.
Well, I like the way she said it specifically was like, well, I can't do it, that means you are. And they're like,
there was one Reddit comment I saw last night where I think the character's name is Kim, where she's like, I'll do it. She's like, you can't do it, but I'll do it. And Marlene's like, you're missing an ear.
Yeah, she's like, you don't have an ear on your head.
Yeah, and there was a user comment that said, that's because she lost listening mode. Just really interesting to see how that scene developed, and then before you know it, they're back waiting. And that was another scene that was shot for shot where Joel and Ellie are kind of sitting there waiting on Tess to get back, and that was another one. It's just straight out of the game and just really cool to see.
I loved this. I loved this radio.
That was new. Yeah. Which I really love that too.
Yeah, I love this code. There's a lot of interesting things. Something that we didn't talk about really quick, which was a big departure, was Joel was in contact with Tommy via this like radio system. And he hadn't heard from him for 3 weeks. So that's an inciting incident for Joel.
Yeah, there's all these little details that are just slight tweaks of even how some of the characters interact, but I'm all for it. I think I would hate if this show was a carbon copy of the game. Like, then of course there's nothing new to really get out of a different medium of this piece of the story, but they're changing just enough that it's fleshing out the story and kind of changing the dynamic of things in a way that's really engaging and really, I think, almost better storytelling in a way. It's really cool to see, from going to thinking Tommy and Joel haven't talked in years, so how does he even know where he is, to going to, they keep loose contact even if they aren't getting along as much anymore. It's really cool to see just these little changes. And also Joel and Tessa's entire beef with Robert is different now. They're trying to get a battery for a car versus just get their guns back. So, which, like, I don't know, it's much more important. It even adds more layers to their Joel as a character on what matters to him in life. Because I think in the game he had nothing to live for anymore.
So I think that was an interesting change to have Joel and Tommy be in contact weekly, at least. And then Tommy is no longer in contact, and that's interesting. Why? Like, obviously we're gonna figure it out, but do you think that's because he's forming Jackson?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not 100% sure what it could be. I know because when they get to Jackson, they're trying to restore power, so maybe that had something to do with it. But I don't know. I think does he reference it? He does reference it, that Tommy's in Wyoming, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So he obviously knows where he is, which is good. So it probably in the show he is in Jackson, and Joel knows that.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I would assume.
But does he?
But does he? Yeah, maybe he just knows that.
Because like, did he go offline to like form Jackson, or does he already know? But I mean, we'll find out.
We'll find out. I'm very curious to see the comparison there. But it's very interesting to have that new dynamic, I feel like.
Yeah, and I like that because obviously it was shown in the game that like the rift between them sort of formed when Tommy went to join the Fireflies.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yep.
think that was interesting that Joel's perspective is, you turned my brother against me, to
Right.
Marlene. So I'm really loving this dynamic that they built between Joel and Marlene, and Tess and Marlene, because there seems to be like an interesting understanding between Marlene and Tess, in
Mm-hmm.
that, because there was just is
Yeah.
a real quick, real subtle moment of them nodding to each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. I'd like to see what that's all about. But if it
Me
stays
too.
ambiguous, I'm also totally fine with that. I
Yeah,
think that's the
yeah. I
nature of
think
the thing.
there's enough implied too that
Hmm.
they all have history. It's obviously a small town there. It's not the Boston of today.
Hmm.
Um, it's an
Yeah,
entirely
it's
different
a small town,
small.
and like what, but I mean more, I mean like, what is Tess's relationship to the Fireflies? Are we
Hmm.
gonna be able
Yeah.
to find any of that out? And what is
Hmm.
Joel's relationship to the Fireflies? Obviously it's
Yeah.
not good, but I
Hmm.
hope that they sort of explore
Me too.
the relationship there, and the relationship between Tommy and Joel and Marlene all
Right.
in one.
Yeah, because they
Um,
seem like they want nothing to do with it, but they also seem to have this established relationship with
mhm,
Marlene too. So I'm very curious to
exactly.
see what that is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I like that a lot. So transitioning into the final scene,
Hmm.
which was so Last of Us. It was great.
It was just spot on.
Hmm.
It was just like the gameplay, down to the production design and the way they're crawling through these bombed out buildings,
Hmm.
and just these tunnels and these tubes. It's just like the game. The way the light, they're sitting in the tunnel and the lights just kind of pass over them. And it
Hmm.
gives you that same tension when you're playing in the game. Because in the
Hmm.
game, I think you probably play through that tension for maybe 15 minutes or so,
Hmm.
where you kind of have to sit in a spot and wait for the lights to pass, and then you can keep going. And they
Hmm.
really establish that so well in just a brief 90 seconds,
Yeah,
and gave the viewer, I think, the exact same kind of tension that you feel when you're playing.
yeah. So one of the things that I really like that they're doing is paying attention to folks who, because Craig Mason's a huge fan of the games, and
Hmm.
obviously Neil Druckmann created them.
Right.
But they're being really smart about paying attention to who doesn't know these games,
They are.
and the way they set up the scanner and the stakes of the scanner. You know
Hmm.
what happens when the scanner goes red.
Hmm.
Um, I just really like the way they did that, calling it
Yeah.
back to this end scene, because you only hear the beep in the background when, like, that Ellie stabs the guy, which was a very Ellie thing to do. It's great.
Yeah.
There was something really, like, even more brutal. She's just really good.
She's
There was
really
something
good.
even more brutal about the second that she realizes what is going on,
Yeah.
and how she takes a second to make that decision, like, I'm gonna
Hmm.
stab him or I'm going to die,
Yeah.
kind of thing. It's just so it was so well done.
Hmm.
And I you know typically when it comes to flashbacks, it can be a little cheap feeling. It can
Yeah.
be a little, let's treat the audience a certain way, like, we're making the assumption here that the audience needs to see this.
Hmm.
This felt different to me. This was very like, we're just gonna give you a little peek at his PTSD. We know that you remember this, but this is
Yeah.
because we're not playing as Joel, we have to be in Joel's head.
Exactly.
And this was a moment of that. And
I agree.
it
Yeah.
was it was brutal.
Yeah, because normally I'm very opposed to dumbing things down to the audience, but I
Mhm.
don't think that's what this is.
Mm-mm.
This was at all. I think it was putting you in his headspace, and what he
Mhm.
was going through,
Yeah.
and how he just went into a blind rage of protect and nothing else. And that kind of goes back into that, how you said Joel version of him is kind of feral.
Mhm.
I really got a sense of that. And that was another thing I think this scene was more powerful in the show than it was in the game by far. Again, it was almost shot for shot, line for line, minus maybe there were two guards in the game. Here it's just the one who they actually establish as a character, so
Mhm.
you know this person already.
Mhm.
And to see the way Joel just flies at him, and
Mhm.
then you see Ellie's reaction, which Craig Mazin touched on this in the behind the scenes video after, where
Mhm.
when Joel defends Sarah,
Mhm.
she cries.
Mhm.
And obviously she knew that person too, that he kills,
Mhm.
but Ellie is like, you see that side of her come out where she's like, she likes it. She likes that for the first time in her life, someone is actually defending her. And this is what's kind of like so endearing, but also really messed up about their
and
relationship.
also this is the world that Ellie grew up in.
Yeah, she
You know
knows
what I mean?
nothing else. This is all she knows is violence and death.
Yeah, and there's like that established. I feel like that established their connection immediately.
For
Like,
sure.
it was just, again, it was just smart writing.
Yeah,
It,
for
it
sure.
was really, really good. And there's just, yeah,
Mhm.
there was something so much more brutal about it too, because like for a moment too, it's so interesting because for a moment too, because they've established this guy, they know him. You think for a second, you're like,
Yeah,
they
they're
know
like,
that
oh,
that's
yeah.
the guy. He's gonna be like, all right, just give me my pills and I'll let you
Mhm.
go. But the second he's like, nope, we're doing this by the books, you're like, oh,
Yeah,
he's
it
never
instantly just
mind.
ups it. Yeah, and just to see Ellie's handling that situation just like she did in the game, where she just takes a beat for a second. She's like, I have to do
This
this.
is what I have to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just survival instinct on her end.
Yeah.
And to see, I think Tessa's reaction in the show was so much more desperate than it was in the game, where she's almost like more angry in the game. And it's like Marlene set us up versus in the show, it's like she's kind of terrified
Yeah.
of this entire situation. And
Yeah.
she's yelling for Joel to like do something because she just doesn't know what to do in this moment for once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This was a perfect setup to what comes next. I think so far they've made really, really good decisions
Mm-hmm.
from the casting to the production design to
Yeah.
the writing. It's all there for me, and I'm really, really
Me
excited
too.
to see what comes next.
Same. So on Reddit, someone brought this up and it's already getting a lot of traction. And apparently, either Craig or Neil said basically that there are a lot of breadcrumbs for people to pick up on as to where it originated. And almost like a little too on the nose there. But the theory is it's contaminated flour.
Oh, I read about this.
Yeah, so too many, straight from this user on Reddit. Let's give them a little credit.
I didn't read about it on Reddit, but I there was some
Yeah,
sort
it's
of
probably, I would assume it's spreading around by now. User Ananost, I think, Anagnost, points out there's too many coincidences that our main characters avoid eating objects with flour. One, Sarah has no flour for pancakes, so they eat eggs instead. They refuse the biscuits. Joel is on the Atkins diet, which is similar to keto. Sarah doesn't take any cookies because she doesn't want to eat raisin cookies. Joel forgets the birthday cake, and that's kind of the gist of it. So that's like 1, 2, 3. That's like 5 instances right there where they've really gone out of their way to show that these characters are not eating bread,
right,
or anything made with flour. So I think that that they might be onto something there.
that's super interesting.
Yeah.
I remember I read something about that, but I can't remember where it was. I tried to find the article just now, but yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And that's not something like we didn't, something that sets us aside too, like we didn't see Patient Zero, like we never saw, which I liked, but if they can go further into what this could look like,
Sure.
awesome. So there's a companion podcast to this show.
There is
called the Last of Us, which I had Last of Us HBO, which I haven't gone into yet. But if you,
either.
the audience, wants to listen to smart people talk instead of these idiots talking about this game and this show, please check it out. I'm sure it's awesome. Chernobyl had a companion podcast, which is one of my very favorite podcast to listen to.
It's also
we're gonna
sorry, the podcast is also hosted by Troy Baker, who is the voice actor of Joel in the game, and it's from what he said, it's a very close character to his heart too. So I think it'll be a really interesting listen. I'm excited to dig into that later this week.
Yeah. So we're gonna try to do this every 2 episodes so that we have a lot of content to talk to you guys about. And thank you guys for joining us. This is a really special one for us,
Yes, very.
and keep a lookout for more.